I'll be there in just a sec. My tea just finished. Well, hi! Welcome back to Mecha Mondays. I'm your intrepid narrator, Fragath, and today we'll be reading more of Full Metal Panic Collector's Edition 2. We are now reading Full Metal Panic Book 5, which is entitled Ending Day by Day Part 2. This will be the second installment of Ending Day by Day Part 2. I have really lost the plot and my copy of the book. Where is it? There it is. Okay. We're having a morning. Okay. Oh, that's right. We cut off partway through into Chapter 4 because Chapter 4 is pretty long. And then we'll cut off partway through into Chapter 5 because Chapter 5 is even longer. So what's happened? Good question. So, since last time, so Sagara Sousuke is no longer on the case, in capital letters, of protecting Kaname, Chidori Kaname. He's been pulled off of that so that he can work more closely with the Arbalest and its built-in Lambda Driver. The Lambda Driver we'll get more details on as we go, but it is weird. It is an odd device. It doesn't seem to make any sense. And this ultimately leads to the reason that Sagara Sousuke does not interface well with the thing. He expects predictability. He expects it to be a reliable, consistent tool that does what he tells it to do. And unfortunately, it isn't like that. It operates under very different rules. It is capable of doing all kinds of nonsensical nonsense, such as making force fields, such as, acting like a energy projectile, such as allowing something to violate the square cube law. And walk around even though it's simply too large and massive to do so and should collapse under its own weight. Basically, the thing is unpredictable, and it never works when he wants it to. So he has a visceral dislike and borderline hatred of the thing. He doesn't like the fact that he's the one who's been saddled with it. He doesn't like that it exists at all. He is not alone in this sentiment. We've heard this sentiment expressed by practically everybody. Certainly has been expressed by Kalainen, has been expressed by Mardukas. I think even Tessa is like, this is a thing that should not exist, but she's kind of tempered by knowing the creator of it, and also being one of the whispered who know ever so slightly more about what's actually going on than the rest of us do. We will be let in on the loop. Get on the loop? In the loop? We will be in the loop eventually. It is going to take a while, and it is very difficult for me to keep from spoiling things by accident, so I will shut up. We will be let in on the loop. It is going to be a few books, but we will be let in dribs and drabs at first, and then it's going to be broken wide open, and it's going to recontextualize basically everything in a way that some may find very interesting, some may find infuriating, and some may find pretty awesome. Or all three, or none. So basically, he's been training now with the Arbalest system. He has a new direct superior officer who is like, you need to get better. You need to be better than how you are because war is changing. And we as Mithril have to be absolutely the best of the best because everyone else is getting better. You need to be better. Better at everything. And he schools him. He schools him pretty brutally. Partly to get Sousuke to actually use the Lambda Driver, and partly to say, hey, you're good. You think you're good, but like everybody's able to do what you're able to do now. And everybody's going to start getting more and more advanced hardware. And while, yes, we'll be getting it too, you have to be used to it. And what you've got is top of the line, but how long is that going to be true? You too need to be top of the line. And also, you have this Lambda Driver thing, please use it. They're basically trying to suss out why it doesn't work. So after he keeps trying to use it, and it's like, wow, he's actually doing really, really poorly. This is going to be an issue. He winds up having a chat session with Al, the AI. Unfortunately, because of text fonts, it looks like it says, in my stream description, it looks like it says AI, the AI. I should have said the Arbalest's AI. That might have delineated it better. It's too late now. And he has a chat with Al. They get onto the topic of Bani Morouta, who is the person who designed and created the Arbalest. Well, the entire ARX system, actually, which implies more than the Arbalest, and we will learn what that means later, of which Al is a part. And Al does something rather interesting in that he plays a message from Bani Morouta, which was buried in his code, to happen when certain questions were asked. It also basically lets Al off the leash. You basically can't turn him off anymore, which is interesting and is fairly spooky. That's basically where we ended up. That's enough blather out of me. Let's get cracking. We are in the midst of Chapter 4, entitled Her Problem. And then we'll be hitting the beginning part of Chapter 5. And then next week we will finish the book. Well, finish Book 5, and then we have Book 6, and then we'll be done with Collector's Edition Volume 2. I'm doing them in little triplets because that's how they're arranged in the Collector's Editions. I do actually have digital copies of most of these now, so I could feasibly read them aloud with the text on screen, but I like the feel of a book in my hands. Call me tactile. All right, give me 1 second, we'll get rocking and a-rolling. October, 1820 hours, Japan Standard Time, Tokyo. Kaname made it back around sunset, packed her clothing and bath set into an overnight bag, and left the apartment, still in her uniform. She couldn't stand the idea of spending another night there. As she walked the road to the station, part of her felt like she was being watched, and the other part was sure she was imagining it. No, she couldn't be imagining it. Someone had to be watching her. Whether it was some secret bodyguard Tessa had mentioned before, or a villain like Gowron, someone was out there. She knew she couldn't trust whoever it was, of course, but knowing there was someone out there mattered to Kaname. Whatever their motives or affiliation, they were her only potential source of information now. She tried walking a little ways, then abruptly turning back. She repeated that action a few times, but it didn't seem to help. It made sense. She wasn't about to see some shifty guy in a trench coat ducking behind a telephone pole. Whoever was tracking her, they were a professional, not some third-rate TV private eye. She carefully considered where she should go next. Into the mountains, far away from civilization? The train could get me to Okotama within 2 hours. No, the mountains are out. They might help me spot my stalker, but it would be that much harder to shake them off or get the upper hand. And what if they really are hostile? Yeah, the mountains won't do. There'd be no witnesses, and I couldn't call for help if I needed it. It's just too dangerous. I need crowds, somewhere far from my school or my house, a place I don't go very often. That'll make it hard for them to attack or kidnap me, and they might even have trouble following me. For now, Kaname decided to head for Shibuya. She took the Keio line to Meidaime. Yes. Meidaime. No. Meidaime. There we go. Meidaime Station. Oh boy. I didn't think I'd get jumped that early, but I probably should have. Had to really think about that one. My apologies. Not a native speaker. For now, Kaname decided to head for Shibuya. She took the Keio line to Meidaime Station, then changed to Inokashira line towards Shibuya, and jumped off the train just before the door closed. It was the same trick she'd played on Sousuke before, but this time she saw no shady characters driving off in a hurry. Just crowds of passengers bustling around the Inokashira line platform. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She was starting to feel like she was acting foolishly, like a child playing spy. It's not stupid, she told herself. It's not stupid. She reboarded the Inokashira line to Shibuya. The sun had gone down, but the city was still flooded with people. Kaname fortified herself with a meal at McDonald's. She did some window shopping at accessory stores and boutiques. She wandered around a CD store, a bookstore, and a Tokyo Hands, then hit up an arcade. Wherever she went, she remained on the alert for suspicious figures around her, but she never spotted anyone. Maybe the stalker is waiting for me outside? To test that theory, she told an employee in the arcade that there was a weird old man following her, and they let her use the back exit. She came out in a dark alley, then took a long detour, coming out beside a boutique a ways away. She quickly climbed up to the boutique's second floor and used a window with a good view to inspect the area around the arcade where she'd just been. Nobody stood out. But then there were just so many people. She looked around carefully for over 5 minutes, but came up dry. Still nothing, she whispered. What would Sousuke do at a time like this? She wondered. She couldn't even begin to imagine. He'd proven capable of sniffing out enemies, pursuers, and other threats in ways that seemed like magic to her layman's eye. Of course, it also led him to a lot of false positives, hence that constant chaos around him. But he'd never failed to spot a genuine threat. It was like there was something in the air that he could smell, and she currently envied his olfactory talents. I just don't know. Nothing I do makes it feel more real. I'm acting as cautiously as I can, but I can't pick up the slightest trace. This is the part where most people would say, I guess nobody is watching me after all. But I know that I'm a person of interest. I know that I'm valuable. That's a fact. I know I'm being watched. I know I'm being tailed. And yet... A sad melody began to play inside the store, a passage from Dvorak's New World Symphony. It was that song about the sun going down on a distant mountain. The store must be closing. Kaname looked at her watch and saw that it was 9 p.m. already. She left the boutique. She was left wandering the streets without having managed a single breakthrough. There were crowds of drunkards all around. More and more stores were closing their shutters. The town wouldn't go to sleep for a while yet, but she was starting... Excuse me. The town wouldn't go to sleep for a while yet, but she was starting to feel adrift, uncertain of where to go. Kaname hugged her bag and squatted down near the Hachiko statue, where people were beginning to thin out. She let out a sigh. She'd told herself this afternoon that she was going to make this work, but she'd hit a wall already. Looking back now, of course an amateur like her wouldn't be able to fool a professional tracker. Even when she'd left out the back of the arcade, they'd probably been anticipating her every move. But that's strange, isn't it? She realized. Would it really be possible for them to predict her actions that precisely? It wasn't as if she was dealing with a psychic. Could they have other measures in place, then? A tracking device? She wondered. She wasn't carrying the transmitter necklace that Sousuke had given her before. She'd left that in her room. But could her stalker have arranged something similar? What if they'd surreptitiously bugged her with a device so small she didn't even know it was there? It wasn't impossible by any means, and if that's what they'd done, there would be no way to shake them. A transmitter with a range of just a few hundred meters could be as small and hard to find as they needed it to be. Was it in her bag? Her coin purse? One of her accessories? Somewhere in her clothing? Her wallet? Her watch? Would it even be possible for her to spot? At the same time, assuming there was a transmitter somewhere on her person, could there be some way to use it to her advantage? Think. Her mind was the one weapon she had at her disposal. A cold gust of wind blew past the Hachiko statue and rustled her hair. November wasn't far off. The weather report had said things would get as cold as early December tonight, and there was rain in the forecast, too. Her school uniform didn't offer much defense from the chill. Just then, she heard a voice addressing her. "Hey, are you alone?" She looked up and saw a white-collar worker standing there. He looked to be in his 30s. His tie was loosened, and he was smiling at her affably. His face reddened from drink. "Are you meeting someone here?" "No." Her thoughts were so jumbled that she accidentally answered honestly. The man then approached her, cooing, "Oh, really? You want to join me for a meal, then? My treat." "I'm not hungry," she told him. "Oh, don't be that way. How about some alcohol? I know a place with a nice atmosphere." "I don't drink." "Okay, but I can't just leave you here looking so lonely. I'll settle for a tea if you just want to talk," the stranger told her. "You might feel better after venting to someone. Don't worry, I won't take you anywhere fishy." "Liar. You'll keep picking at me until you've got me passing out drunk, and then you'll drag me to some seedy joint and have your way with me. You think you're the first guy who's made a pass at me like this? I'm a veteran at turning guys like you down." Kaname sucked in a deep breath and then spoke up, loudly. "Excuse me, I happen to be busy with—" she began, then abruptly stopped herself. A light bulb appeared over her head. The idea had come to her completely out of the blue, and that spontaneity meant that her pursuer wouldn't anticipate it. What is it?" the drunken stranger asked her. Only after a careful scrutinization of the man's face did Kaname say her next words. "Hey, mister, want to hit a hotel?" "21 October, 21:14 hours, West Pacific Standard Time. Tuach de Danann, below surface, near sea near Philippines. They entered the empty briefing room to find Kalainen and Clouseau sitting there, along with a soldier from the PRT. He was a private of Chinese descent by the name of Wu. He had an AS license, and he'd done some M9 training as well. They were all focused on a news program that was playing on a portion of the screen on the wall. The channel was the BBC, a signal they'd probably intercepted within the past few hours. A Caucasian reporter was in Hong Kong, standing beside a park near the harbor and speaking briskly in the orange light of the street lamps. Neither occupying army has issued a statement regarding the whereabouts of the unknown machine. Downtown shops and kiosks have been forced to suspend business, leaving a Mong Kok area turned distressingly silent. A dark green armored car sat parked behind the reporter. Further beyond it, an AS of the RK-92 line was visible from the hips down. The foreboding image effectively conveyed the grim tension of the city on lockdown. "Where's Yang?" Clouseau wanted to know. "He's on the way," Mao responded. It was just then that Yang, dressed in a tank top with a towel over his shoulders, came running in, out of breath. "Sorry I'm late." "We're all here, then. I'll begin," Clouseau told the group. Apparently, his business was specifically with the 4 soldiers gathered here. It suddenly occurred to Sousuke that he, Mao, Yang, and Wu were all of East Asian descent. "As you may already be aware, an AS of unknown affiliation has appeared in Hong Kong," Clouseau said. "The lone wolf machine has engaged in repeated destructive acts and is believed to still be hiding somewhere within the city limits. Both the North and South Chinese armies have suffered losses, and divided Hong Kong is a powder keg." Divided Hong Kong. The city was occasionally referred to that way nowadays. The overthrow of the Chinese government a few years back, and the civil war that followed, had led to a city under concurrent control by 2 different governments. The Kowloon Peninsula, the part contiguous with the mainland, belonged to the Chinese Democratic Union, South China. Hong Kong Island in the south belonged to the People's Liberation Committee, in other words, North China. The 2 sides were still constantly squabbling over areas like Hubei province, and Hong Kong was the one region where they'd agreed to a ceasefire. It was similar to Berlin's situation in the East and West Germany days. Both armies had combat squads stationed in the city, just within firing range of one another, in a state of constant standoff. "Is it really just one AS?" Yang asked, scrubbing his wet hair with the towel. "Just one, as far as we can tell," Clouseau told him. "Reports are jumbled, so we can't say for certain." "What kind of machine is it?" Mao asked, and Clouseau brought up the image. It was a relatively clear photograph, probably taken by a civilian, and the sight caused Mao to let out a groan. Sousuke also found himself turning his eyes downward with a sigh. "I knew it," he mumbled. It was an AS of the same class as the Venom. He recognized the massive upper body and pointed head, the red mono-eye, the ponytail like heat vent. Its paint job was gray and dark blue, with a simple yet oddly crooked camouflage design. The picture had been taken in a quintessential Hong Kong commercial district, with white smoke drifting in the background. The AS in question was tearing off one of the myriad shop signs with one hand, while pointing a bullpup-style assault rifle at the screen with the other. The composition of the shot, very close up, taken nearly from underfoot, made it easy to imagine what had happened to the photographer right after. "What are the terrorists after?" Sousuke asked next. "Unknown," Clouseau answered. "No one's claimed responsibility. If I had to guess, they want to reignite the Chinese Civil War or destroy Hong Kong economy. Or... It could be a challenge issued to us," he finally concluded. Sousuke felt silent. He didn't like the idea, but it was entirely possible. Previous incidents suggested that the enemy force behind these machines was aware of Mithril's existence, and of the Tuatha Dé Dananns as well. This picture was taken in an urban region, Yao Ma Te, on the Kowloon Peninsula side. Clouseau continued. The enemy machine destroyed a South Chinese Army armored vehicle, then disappeared with the use of a smoke bomb. That was 26 hours ago. Then he put an enlarged map of Hong Kong on screen. Since then, the Venom type has been popping up every 8 to 12 hours across Kowloon and Hong Kong, causing indiscriminate destruction. Close to 10 ASs have been destroyed, and casualties appear to be significant. Neither army has been able to shoot the machine down, and they are also unable to find it or track it. Given past experience, we can assume it's capable of invisibility. Then the Chinese armies can't find it with their equipment alone, Mao pointed out. They don't have the information on state-of-the-art ECSs, Clouseau agreed. The idea that it could be lurking anywhere, invisible, probably hasn't even occurred to them. Did you warn them? Yang asked. No, Clouseau said, on orders from top brass. Why not? The man pressed. Even if we did offer advice and technological aid. Oh, that's Kalainen. Even if we did offer advice and technological aid, Kalainen put in, and one army or the other found the enemy machine, they still wouldn't have the equipment to fight a Venom type. It would just get more people killed. That's why we'll handle the pest extermination ourselves. His reasoning was sound, but Sousuke sensed that there was a far more calculated reasoning he had left unsaid. If they gave the North or South Chinese armies information on cutting-edge ECSs, that would effectively be giving them information on Mithril, which depended on that technology to maintain their clandestine nature. So, Mao prodded, not even a Venom can remain in top form while acting alone and continuously for longer than 24 hours. It will require ammo restocking and simple maintenance after combat, and the operator will need rest, Clouseau said. We need to find their safe house, set up an M9 squadron to surround them, take them by surprise, and get things under control. We are under no obligation to fight them in fair and open combat. That's why we want you all doing recon. Recon? It will be a joint operation with the Intelligence Division's Hong Kong branch, Clouseau went on. Offer them the knowledge they need and then locate the enemy base. We'll surface after nightfall and send out a helicopter. You'll fly to Hong Kong ahead of us. Sousuke too? Mao asked. She was probably thinking that, at times like these, Sousuke usually stayed on board, on standby with the arbalest. Clouseau was about to respond, but Kalainen got there first. Yes. Sousuke said nothing. We are going to try not to use the arbalest during this incident, to reinforce that. You understand, Sergeant Sagara? Yes, Sousuke responded, listlessly. Same time frame. Maruyamacho, Shibuya, Tokyo. How about here? The man asked as they arrived at the Dogenzaka Love Hotel district. He was pointing to a building done up in chic colors with an electric sign that read, Vacancy. The main sign read, Hotel Diversion, Rest, 2 hours, 5,500 yen. Overnight, weekdays, 9,000 yen. The rain that had begun as a drizzle was now forming bigger drops. It would be coming down in force, and soon. They were only a few hundred meters from the business district, but things were already deathly quiet. The only people passing by were all couples, for some reason, all either taking very small or very quick steps. Almost nobody was on their own. An individual all by themselves, or a group of just men, would be immediately conspicuous.
Ah, this is perfect!
She found herself clenching a fist in triumph. The middle-aged man, watching her behavior, he'd called himself Kamoi, looked a little suspicious, but regrouped and reached for Kaname's shoulder. "It's perfect?" he said. "Good. Let's go in then. We can, right? Right?"
Wait a minute.
She brushed off his hand, strode up to the Love Hotel, and examined its exterior. She then looked around to check its spatial relationship with the other buildings.
It's good. Let's go in.
"That's great, Mizuki-chan. Big Brother's gonna show his hustle tonight." Mizuki was the name she'd thought to give him on the spot.
"Sorry, Mizuki,"
she whispered internally to her friend. Leaving behind the man, who continued quietly revving himself up, Kaname strode into the hotel. The cheap automatic door rattled open in her wake. The lighting was dim. There was no large lobby like a normal hotel. The ceiling was low, and the corridors were narrow. Beside a corner that looked like a reception desk was a strange, lit-up panel. It was about half the size of one of the blackboards at school, with about 40 room pictures lined up side by side. Beneath each picture was a room number, a red light, and a button. About half of them were lit.
What is all this?
While she stared at it, puzzled, Kamoi caught up with her and said, "Which room do you want?"
So you press a button to choose your room. The photo whose lights are out are probably in use. The photos whose lights are out are probably in use,
Kaname reasoned.
In use.
She snapped back to reality as she realized what that meant.
Am I insane? What am I doing here? This is nuts! It's not too late. Reconsider. Leave this stupid love hotel right now.
Then she thought,
No, you won't make any progress that way. This is way more important than society's ideas about virtue and chastity. It's one of those things he always used to talk about. Yes, a threat to the general security. This might just give you a way out of your situation. Don't be afraid. Use your head. Make things go your way.
Kaname's internal struggle lasted only briefly before she successfully reassured herself, then checked the numbers for empty rooms. Then, examining the fire escape diagram next to them, she learned the Love Hotel's layout. The placement of the rooms, the placement of the windows.
If north is that way, then right. Room 202,
she finally decided. "Huh? That one looks pretty small," Kamoi objected. "They have better rooms."
"Maybe I'll just leave,"
Kaname suggested. "Only kidding. Sorry. That one's fine. Okay?"
"Okay,"
Kamoi said placatingly. He appeared to be completely spineless. Kaname hit the button, took the key card, and headed for the second floor. Room 202 was right next to the elevator. Giving the vaguest of responses to Kamoi's attempts at small talk, questions about her school uniform, assurances to relax, Kaname entered the room.
"Surprising. It's actually pretty nice,"
was her first thought upon entering. The lighting was bright, the furniture was new, and the room was spick and span. There was a large LCD screen and an audio system. Strange, she'd always assumed love hotels would be seedier than this. Still, the room's most conspicuous object was the large double bed that took up most of the corner of the room. There were tissue boxes on the pillows and...
Yuck. Whatever, she told herself dismissively. Guess it's time to set this guy straight. "Okay, I want to talk to you about..."
Just as Kaname turned around to broach the subject, she found Kamoi already rushing at her, nostrils flaring. He was pulling off his jacket and tie as he lumbered towards her. There was madness in his eyes. He looked like a completely different person than before. "We could shower after,"
he said urgently. You're so pretty, Mizuki-chan. I need to talk. You don't have to be afraid. No, I meant, that high school uniform. Hey, let me say, Mizuki-chan. Kamui swept her up in his arms with the force of a tsunami, and she gagged on his booze-steeped breath. He was holding her too tight for her to even struggle. At this point, a normal girl might have started crying. But unfortunately for Kamui, Kaname wasn't normal. She'd run gauntlets of gunfire and explosions with Sosuke. She'd had a cold-hearted terrorist pointing a gun at her. She'd been through a literal death match with that steel wall of a sergeant, John Dunnigan. This man was small time by comparison. Darn it! Without panicking or screaming, Kaname reached for the 200,000-volt stun gun she'd arranged in an easily reachable place in her bag. She calmly removed the safety, jammed the prongs into Kamui's side, and with a cool-headed mercilessness she'd never felt before, she pulled the trigger. The man grunted, spasmed briefly, and then went limp. He toppled onto Kaname, sending them both onto the bed, where she ended up lying face up beneath his very heavy body. After shoving him off with some effort, she mused to herself, shoulders heaving. I wonder who counts as the victim in this case. After a few minutes to calm her breathing, Kaname sprang into action again. She popped open her bag and searched around inside, eventually producing 2 sets of aluminum alloy handcuffs, tear gas spray, a powerful flashlight, and another disposable taser. It was an outrageous arsenal by the standards of a teenage girl. They were all things Sosuke had forced on her in the past, but which she hadn't paid much mind to before now. She'd confiscated the handcuffs from him, too, but until today they'd all been gathering dust in a drawer. Holding the handcuffs in her mouth, she grabbed the legs of the unconscious Kamui and dragged him into the bathroom. Even someone as athletic as she was had to struggle with the weight of a fully grown man. The bathroom was shockingly large and fancy. It had a bathtub with a jacuzzi, which was big enough for 2 adults with room to spare. I guess some people take baths together. Nodding in recognition for some reason, her eyes fell on a metal fixture next to the bathtub. It must have some use. It looked like a towel rack, but the location of it was unusual. It must have some use she couldn't fathom. Well, it looks sturdy at least. She fastened Kamui's leg to the fixture with the handcuffs and tugged a few times to make sure it would hold. That should do it. He wouldn't be able to leave the bathroom. He probably wouldn't even be able to cry for help. Given the kind of hotel this was, it probably had great soundproofing. Okay, next. Kaname slammed the bathroom door shut and began searching around the wash area. She snatched up one of the bathrobes laid out for guests and returned to the bed. Now, she put her hands on her hips and examined her outfit, her faithful, familiar winter uniform. But her earlier hypothesis, that there might be a transmitter planted somewhere on her person, meant she had to ditch her clothing. She quickly began to disrobe. Off came her white jacket and blue skirt, her blouse and ribbon tie, her shoes and wristwatch, all of it. Once she was in her underwear, she did another round of thinking. She felt around the elastic of her panties and decided there couldn't be anything there. But what about her bra? Could modern technology create a transmitter that would fit into one of the cups? The answer, unfortunately, yes. She let out a sigh, shed her bra, and set it on the bed with the rest of her clothing. She felt too awkward to dissect it to determine the presence of a transmitter there. She spun around in front of the mirror, now only in her white panties. She wasn't there to admire her own naked form. She was checking to make sure there was nothing suspicious stuck on her skin. Once she was certain she was clean, she put on the bathrobe. She closed it firmly over her chest, then tied it in place with a belt. Time to choose a weapon. She grabbed a taser. It was the disposable self-defense kind, so it only had 2 charges. You could hit someone within 5 meters with enough high-voltage current to knock them out. And then the handcuffs. She couldn't forget them. She had no guarantee that these things weren't also bugged, but considering they'd been lying in a drawer up until today, it seemed pretty unlikely. Okay, let's do this. Kaname slapped her cheeks and revved herself up. Kaname turned off the lights, then opened the rectangular door in the northern wall. As expected, there was a window on the other side. After some fumbling, she managed to get the window open. Outside, she could see the wall of the next hotel over within reach. The alley below was pretty far off the main road, so there was no sign of anyone there. The rain was coming down harder now. In the dim light, she could see sheets of water sweeping across the narrow strip of concrete. Below was a chain-link fence that separated the two hotels. Since she was on the second floor, the top of the fence appeared to be just within stepping range. Okay, now, Kaname thought to herself, creeping onto the window frame and leaning out, with the taser's strap held in her mouth. Gripping the window frame firmly with both hands, she worked one foot towards the top of the fence. The front of her bathrobe immediately fell open. She knew nobody could see her, but it still added to her stress. The tip of her toe touched the fence. Almost there, she gasped. The metal was wet with the rain, and just as she was about to shift her weight over, her foot slipped. Her hands lost their grip. She tried to work her fingers into the chain links instead, but she couldn't. Balance lost, she plummeted, scraping her arm against the fence on her way to the concrete below. The impact left her right side numb and forced a groan from her throat. The pain was so bad that she couldn't breathe at first. The taser had fallen nearby. The belt of her bathrobe had come away easily and was lying in a puddle beyond it. For a while, she just lay on the wet concrete, curled up in the rain. She was in an alley behind a love hotel, alone, effectively naked and soaked to the bone. It was unsightly. It was ugly. It was pathetic. A wave of futility washed over her, and she almost started crying from the misery of it all. "Stop it," she whispered then. "You're showing weakness now again. Purge all those stupid thoughts," she commanded herself. "Trust yourself. Now, keep going." Gritting her teeth, Kaname picked herself up. There were scrapes here and there along her soft, fair skin. Fortunately, no bones were broken. It looked like she'd get off with some bruises at worst. She dragged the muddy, soaked bathrobe belt toward her, tied it firmly back into place, and then picked up the taser. She wanted to check to make sure it wasn't damaged, but since it only fired twice, she opted against it. Instead, she stood up, unsteadily, and began to walk forward in her bare feet. Kaname began to walk the hotel's perimeter. As she passed by the back door, she could hear the receptionist watching TV. There, she stepped over some bushes, mounted a cement wall, then got around behind the hotel block where she wouldn't be seen. About 3 buildings down from there, she came to a hotel with a fire escape in the back. "That's it," she told herself. Holding her robe tightly closed, Kaname looked up at the stairway where rain continued to spatter the rusty, unadorned iron frame. She'd scouted out this hotel in advance. It was the tallest building in the area. The roof would provide a perfect view of the nearby area and the main avenue, which meant it was also the most likely place for her stalker to be hiding. Too elementary? Maybe, but she had a feeling she was right. Kaname's breathing was coming hard and ragged now. Her fingertips and toes were freezing, yet for some reason her body was on fire. She climbed over the iron grill at the entrance, then carefully ascended the fire escape. After climbing around 6 floors, she found the roof within reach. Once she was in range to poke her eyes up over the lip, she did so, and inspected the surrounding area. The roof turned out to be host to a labyrinthine layout of water towers and air conditioning units. She couldn't see anyone, at least from here. Kaname crept onto the roof, carefully and quietly. She kept her body low, half crawling her way to one of the humming compressors. She peeked out from behind it to get a look at the other half of the roof, the part that faced the main avenue. The illumination from the street below cast the roof's edge in precise silhouette. It looked like a river of light in the darkness. And on the bank of the river, is that him? Kaname wondered. She could see a man squatting there, his back to her. He was kneeling on the edge of the roof, looking down at the street. He didn't look especially imposing, just a bit on the tall side, maybe Kaname's height. He wore a thin coat over his rather plump frame, and there was a large attaché case at his feet. He was also holding a small electronic device, and despite the rain, he didn't have an umbrella. She was sure now it was him. Her hand, numbed with the cold, gripped the taser tightly. Remove the safety. There. Kaname took in a deep breath and crept up to the man. Thanks to her bare feet and the rain's constant roar, she made no noise as she moved. The man's gaze remained focused on the street below. He didn't seem to have noticed her. Just 5 meters left, she thought. She could feel her heart racing, her pulse pounding through the muscles of her neck. 3 meters left. Close enough. Don't move, Kaname shouted. The man jolted in response, but froze in place. I have a weapon on you. Put your hands up and turn to face me. Slowly. She recited the lines she remembered from some movie she'd seen once, and the man did as he was told. She could see his face now, a bespectacled, middle-aged man, overweight, about 40. He had the air of a bureaucrat to him. The sight of her, standing there in a soaked bathrobe, black hair in disarray, and holding a taser on him, caused the man to let out a groan. What in the world? He had a high, husky voice. You have business with me, right? She retorted, so I thought I'd come to you. You notice the transmitter, then? The man asked thoughtfully, after a moment. He looked like he was trying hard to appear calm and in control, despite his obvious frustration. That's why you went to a hotel with a complete stranger. I think I underestimated you. You sure did, Kaname told him. Now, you have a gun, right? Pull it out slowly and drop it at your feet. I'm from Mithril, the man told her. I won't harm you. You can say that all you want, but there's no way I'll trust you. Kaname's breath came out in white puffs as she spoke. She couldn't keep herself from shivering from the cold and her fear. As if noticing that, the man let out a mocking laugh. Don't get cocky now. You think I feel threatened by a taser? I can't kill you, but I can still teach that smart mouth of yours a lesson. Still, we have bigger priorities right now. These last few days, you've had someone besides me tailing... I said drop the gun, you piece of shit! Kaname cried. At exactly that moment, a bullet hit the man square in the chest. The impact brought a spray of droplets from his rain-soaked button-up shirt. Huh? Kaname breathed. Another shot came. Then another. And another. The man's plump frame twitched and trembled. One shot hit his head and tore off a part of his scalp. With an eerily expressionless face, the self-professed Mithril agent staggered and fell into a puddle. Kaname turned around. There was another man there, dressed in a plain jacket and jeans, standing beside an air conditioning unit about 10 paces away. He was skinny, with short-cropped hair. She'd never seen him before. No, wait. Wasn't he the one she'd seen the other day in Sengawa Shopping Street? Found you, the man said, holding a black automatic pistol in his right hand. Ni-ho, my dear, and goodbye. Wait, Kaname began to say, but without a moment's hesitation, the man pointed the gun at Kaname and fired. What happened next was pure luck. Perhaps it was her bewilderment at the suddenness of his appearance, or her body simply buckling from the cold, but one of Kaname's knees suddenly gave out from under her. That slight loss of balance meant that the bullet only grazed her cheek. After a long pause, Kaname let out a breath. She was surprised, but so was the man. The slide portion of his pistol remained locked in its cocked-back position, and she remembered that this meant he was out of bullets. She'd seen Sosuke wield guns enough times to know that. The assassin embarked upon his change of magazine, slowly and deliberately. He showed no sign of rushing, and the reason was obvious. There's nowhere to run, he told her calmly. He's right, Kaname realized. She was cornered against the edge of the roof. The best hiding places, the air conditioning units and water towers, and her one real way out, the stairs, were all on the other side of the man. There was nowhere to run, nowhere at all, and the overwhelming reality of the situation washed over her like a wave. Despair seized Kaname's heart in an iron grip. What's going on? She wondered. I don't know. Who is this man? I don't know. Why do I have to die? I don't know. Is this my fate? My fate. The moment these words entered her mind, an indescribable anger began to well up inside her. Her legs, once frozen up in fear, now sprang into action. As if acting of its own volition, her body turned and launched into a dash. I'm going to fight this, she told herself fiercely. No matter what happens, I won't let that creep toy with me. I'll struggle to my last breath. I won't offer myself up for slaughter. I wonder if he'd tell me I'm doing the right thing, she wondered, thinking wistfully of Sosuke. It's no use, the assassin told her, as he readied his gun once more and then fired. The bullet grazed her black hair. The edge of the roof was coming closer and closer, but Kaname didn't stop. She sped up. Her feet left the concrete. Using the raised edge of the roof as a vaulting platform, she leaped into the air. Now she held her breath and looked down to where the vast, wide alley stretched out below her. She made it across the deep, deep ravine and descended in an arc towards the next building over, which was about 2 stories shorter than the one she'd just come from. On the building's roof there was a shed made out of sheet iron. Her body collapsed on top of it, broke through the roof, and smashed through the junk that was piled up inside. The sound was tremendous, and Kaname found herself showered with fragments of wood and plastic. The moment of impact made the world around her go black and forced the air out of her lungs in a soundless wheeze. Scrapes, cuts, bruises, sprains. Pain assaulted her from every direction, and her face contorted in agony. Ugh, she moaned. She was alive. And she could still move. Incredibly, the game wasn't over. Kaname tried to stand and fell. One more time, she told herself, and managed it this time. The bathrobe was hanging on her shoulders by a thread. The belt was gone now and nowhere in sight, but she still had the taser gripped tightly in her right hand. She kicked the door open. It gave way more easily than she'd expected. Stumbling out of the shed, Kaname looked up at the roof she'd just jumped from. The man's silhouette was visible. His gun was pointed toward her. With a grunt, she took off running. A muffled gunshot passed over her head. The bullet ricocheted off the roof at her feet, kicking up a spray of water. The stairs! Kaname looked around for the stairs. This building didn't have an external fire escape, and she couldn't see anywhere to jump down on or over to. The only way out was in, through a door in a low tower that took up a corner of the roof. Panting, she threw herself at the metal door and turned the heavy knob. She pulled as hard as she could, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. Both pushing and pulling proved fruitless. The door rattled in her grip, but showed no sign of giving way. She punched and kicked it and cried and screamed, but the door remained unyielding. No, no, she moaned. Her one escape route was denied to her. Clinging to the door, she looked back at the roof she'd come from one more time. In the hazy neon light, she could see the assassin moving lithely to jump down to her building. For the well-trained assassin, such a drop was easily accomplished. If a mere girl could fall that far unfazed, he could do it with ease. He touched down like a goose in the water. suitable imagery for a man called Fei Hong, then righted himself smoothly and began walking. He couldn't see the girl from here, but then, even if she could hide, she couldn't truly escape him. There was no need to worry. There was no need to hurry. He just had to see the job through, as he always did. Corner the chicken, then chop off its head. He'd shoot her with his gun, defile her corpse, take a picture, and send it to Hong Kong. That was what the man wanted. He had no doubt about that. Even so, he was starting to grow weary of the girl's struggling. She refused to beg for her life or resign herself with dignity. She just kept running, even though it wouldn't save her. It was really just embarrassing to watch. He made it to the entrance to the stairs. In addition to the broken shed, the roof was a mess of water towers and air conditioning units, as well as a storage space for gardening and planting tools. The cluttered roof made it hard to get a good look around him. Let's try that again. The cluttered roof made it hard to get a good look around him. The rain and the dark didn't help matters. Of course, he wasn't letting his guard down. He wouldn't heed her cries for mercy. He'd give her a quick death the next time he saw her. Those were the orders he had been given, after all. After a careful examination of the area, he realized immediately where the girl was hiding. Beyond an air conditioning unit, he could see stacks of large planter pots, piled high and left to the elements. Behind the pots, through a just visible gap, he could see someone crouching. That someone was dressed in a muddy bathrobe, huddled like a cornered rabbit. Apparently, she thought she could wait him out here. Apparently, she thought she could wait him out there. Fei Hong approached the spot, took aim, and fired. The .45 caliber slugs caused the pots to break into noisy pieces and collapse. They also shredded the bathrobe beyond. The girl didn't scream, but just spasmed and fell toward him in the darkness. No, he realized, his eyes widening. It wasn't the girl. What he saw toppled there in the dim light was simply the scraps of a pot wrapped up in a bathrobe. Then where is the girl? From the top of the water tank, Kaname gazed down at the back of the man's head. She was naked except for her underwear, and her soaked hair clung to her frozen body. Her face was as pale as death. Kneeling down, concealing her chest with her left arm despite her desperate situation, she held the taser steadily in front of herself with her free right hand. Just 2 meters. That's how close she was. She was afraid to pull the trigger. The tension and fear were driving her mad. He might notice her any moment, yet countless doubts stayed her finger on the trigger. Will I really hit him? Will a weapon like this, a self-defense tool really, actually affect him? Did he really not see through my trap? Maybe he's just pretending to fall for it. After all, how could an amateur like me outsmart someone like him? It can't be this easy, can it? Maybe it would be better to beg for my life, or yell, "Hands up," first? There is a picture by the illustrator Shikidoji here, but it is describing more or less her condition at the moment, which is not especially safe for work, so we will not be showing it. My apologies. If you get an EPUB version of the book, it should have it in there. There's nothing particularly detailed or graphic there, but I'm not going to... I've already had close encounters of the, hey, you've got something that could resemble nudity, even though it kind of didn't. And I'm not willing to take the chance again. There's nothing explicit there, but... In that moment, a set of words she had heard once before rose up in her mind. Don't lick your lips in front of your prey. The person who had said those words wasn't here with her now, but remembering them gave her the last ounce of strength she needed. Kaname pulled the trigger, and a dry pow ripped through the air. The explosive force of the propellant cartridge sent the spiked prongs flying into the man's shoulder, where they stuck. Tens of thousands of volts raced through the wire, causing him to spasm wildly. White smoke and sparks flew from where the prongs pierced his shoulder. After taking a few seconds' worth of electric charge, the man fell to his knees. He didn't collapse, though. He had endured the shot. She fired again. This time, the prongs stabbed into the man's back. Another zap, just to be sure. The man let out a groan, dropped his gun, and toppled over like a sack of potatoes. It didn't look like he was about to move any time soon. Did I do it? The moment the thought entered her mind, Kaname's breathing suddenly quickened, and her body began to sweat. Panting heavily, she dropped the spent taser and jumped down off the water tank. She crept up to the man slowly, picked up the gun, and retrieved the bathrobe that had fallen nearby. The garment that had saved her life was like a tattered rag by now, but she still felt better having it on. The man appeared to be completely unconscious. That was natural, of course. She'd hit him twice with a taser. Even if he was a professional assassin, he was still just a person. And she had beaten him. She'd beaten him, all by herself. There was no rush of elation that came with the thought. She just stood there in the falling rain, struggling to process the reality of it. Just then, a new voice reached her ears. "Looks like you won." Kaname looked around and saw 3 human-like shapes standing beyond the air-conditioning unit, illuminated by the faint neon light. She gazed at them silently. The one at the center was a young man on the short side, holding an umbrella. No, he wasn't short. He only looked that way because the men flanking him were so tall. The 2 hulking creatures were dressed in dark green coats, with hoods drawn low to hide their faces. One of the large men had the mithril agent with him. He was carrying him over his shoulder, as if he were feather light. "I believe," the young man said in elegant tones, "that there are 2 kinds of women in the world, those who look good in the rain and those who don't. You are, without a doubt, the former. I think anyone who saw you now would be forced to agree." At first, Kaname could only stare at him. "That's sarcasm, right?" she said listlessly, letting the right hand, which was still holding the pistol, droop to her side. A cold wind stirred her tattered bathrobe and her soaked black hair. "You wound me," the young man objected. "I meant it as the highest compliment." "Uh-huh," Kaname agreed suspiciously. "And who are you again?" The young man advanced toward her in lieu of a response. He was taller than she'd thought, around the same height as Sousuke, maybe, but he carried himself with a sort of airy weightlessness. He wore a long black coat over black pants, a black vest, and a white shirt. They all had a modest yet lustrous sheen reserved for garments of the highest quality. "A kindred spirit," he said at last, closing his umbrella. Kaname could see his face now. This young man wasn't Japanese. He had fair, smooth skin, bluish-gray eyes, and silver hair that seemed to flow like waves. If she hadn't just been through everything she'd been through, she might have found herself captivated by his prince-like visage. His expression, visage even, his expression was languidly enigmatic, in a way that made it impossible for her to tell if he was friend or foe, hostile or harmless. "I came to help you, is what I'd like to say, but that's not actually the case," he admitted. "I suspect that the result would have been the same either way, though, whether I'd lent you a hand or just chosen to watch. I don't have any particular business with you now, but if you want to know my motives regarding you, I suppose I'd say I'm testing a theory." "A theory?" Kaname questioned. "A paradox related to fate and karma," the young man clarified. "A dilemma, one could say." "You're annoying the hell out of me," she retorted. "Can you just say what you mean already?" "I'm not a fan of excessive directness. Words are such fleeting vehicles. But that aspect of you is definitely part of your appeal." The man smiled, with the air of someone enjoying some great classic song. Kaname fell silent. Suddenly, she felt as though she'd met this man before. In my New York days? She wondered. No, that's not it. She'd had no friends in New York with that particular shade of hair. She'd never seen the color in movies or photo spreads either. It was a distinctive ash blonde. Suddenly, it came to her. "Wait," she said, "are you Tessa's—" Ignoring the question, the man walked past Kaname to look down at the assassin lying in the puddle. "Get up, Fei Hung. Surely you're back with us by now." The man stirred a bit, then lifted his head and whispered, "Mr. Silver, you were watching?" "Not quite the whole show, I'm afraid," the young man said apologetically. "She's too much for you, you know. You really should give it up. You should really give up." "I refuse," the man named Fei Hong said hoarsely. "I'll overlook your actions, which were taken in defiance of the organization's will," the young man told him, "but I want you to convince your brother to cease his rampage in Hong Kong immediately." "You think he'll do what I tell him?" Fei Hung scoffed. "You think he'll even listen to me?" "Revenge is an empty thing, you know," the young man told him. "This isn't about revenge. It's about doing what he asked for us, the man who picked the two of us off the streets," Fei Hung replied. "As long as he wills it, I'll keep trying to kill her for as long as I live." "I see," the young man observed in a distant tone of voice. "Then I'm afraid this is goodbye, Fei Hung." "Only because I'll kill you, Leonard Testarossa!" The next instant, the assassin had sprung into the air. His arms flashed with motion. A silver light went tearing through the air in the young man's direction. In that same instant, Kaname saw his coat ripple. The young man himself barely moved, but the coat seemed to come alive, intercepting the light streaking towards him, 4 throwing knives of varying sizes, and knocking them away. His clothing wasn't just bulletproof, it was actually moving on its own, unfurling like a pair of protective black wings. The assassin grunted in surprise, but did not stop his charge. He seemed to glide across the surface of the roof, drawing another knife in a backhand grip as he went. "That won't help you," Leonard told him. Then one of the large men in green was suddenly there, standing in between them. He'd been motionless and wordless up until that point, but in that moment he had moved like the wind. The assassin charged right into him and plunged his knife into his center mass, but as if ignoring the blow entirely, the large man just seized the assassin's throat with an arm as thick as a log. With that arm, Fei Hung choked out. With that one arm, the large man lifted the struggling assassin into the air. He must have been incredibly strong. "Requesting order," the large man said in a clearly artificial voice. "Countermeasure A1, Leonard ordered, "and be thorough." "Roger," the large man in green replied. Kaname heard a snap. Fei Hong's neck was broken. For extra measure, the large man then pressed his free left hand against the assassin's chest. There was a gunshot blast, and blood came bursting out of the assassin's back through a gaping hole opened up in his chest. It shattered his spinal cord and scapula, which left both of his arms dangling at strange angles. "Countermeasure A1 complete," the large man reported before callously tossing the corpse away. "Designated threat neutralized." "Well done," Leonard commended him. "Return to standby." "Roger." The large man walked past Kaname, his coat flapping in the wind. Each movement released a low, audible creak from his joints. Kaname was able to catch a glimpse beneath his hood, and saw only a matte black mask with a narrow slit, like snow goggles, where the eyes should be. "He's not human?" she realized. The revelation came to Kaname in a corner of her mind that was otherwise numb from the brutal sight she'd just witnessed. "Plan 1211, the Alistor," Leonard explained without prompting. "You might as well call them the world's smallest AS, though at that size you might just as well call them robots. I think you're capable of understanding this now, but it's really quite difficult to get an AS to act autonomously. Satisfactory miniaturization of the power and control systems proved challenging." From what Kaname knew, the technical hurdles to achieve what he was describing went far beyond challenging. "Now, that was the actual reason I was here," Leonard told her. "I'm sorry to have made you witness something so awful." I don't really know what's going on," Kaname said, but... But? "I'm sure you didn't have to kill him," she finished, her voice trembling. Leonard looked genuinely puzzled. "He was trying to kill you, you know." "I know, but... Besides, I haven't killed nearly as many people as your boyfriend," he pointed out again. Kaname gasped, immediately recognizing that he was referring to Sosuke. Instead of asking, "How do you know him?" she found herself protesting the claim, almost reflexively. He's been fighting in wars since he was little. He couldn't help it. The only people he fights are bad guys, and he always helps innocent people and the weak and the vulnerable. Plus, it's not like he likes it," she said defensively. "I think it really bothers him, actually. That's why, it's not the same. He wouldn't do things this way." Leonard listened to her awkward stammering with great interest. Then he peered into her eyes, smiling mischievously. "You don't really believe that, do you?" "Well, I mean..." Kaname found herself averting her eyes. "The core behavior is the same in either case, yet you only criticize me." Leonard observed logically. "You really are partial to him, aren't you?" You love him." "I don't," she protested. "Really?" "Really." "Look at me," Leonard demanded. "What?" What came next caught Kaname completely off guard. Leonard took her gently by the shoulders and pulled her towards him, and the second she looked into his eyes, his lips were touched to hers. The contact was cold, and soft, and wet. It was all so sudden that her mind went blank. Kaname couldn't remember where she was, who she was. Couldn't remember where she was, who he was, who she was, anything. She felt no revulsion. To the contrary, that sweet, fleeting sensation threatened to take hold of her heart and never let go. Time had stopped. And because time stopped, there is an image. One sec. This one I can show. It's not as problematic. Which one are you? I think it's insert 4? Yeah, there we go. Oh, shoot. I forgot that. I'll show it later. I think there's one of Leonard in here. A color. There's one in here somewhere. I'm not going to worry about it for now. Time is still stopped, by the way, because the text said so. I'm not making it up. Why would I lie? I wouldn't lie. I wouldn't lie. I can't lie. I might not even be real. Sorry, I am meat. I am not a large language model. Which is exactly what a large language model would say now that I think of it. When time moved again, which it is now doing, Leonard accepted the slap without resistance. She'd thought she'd hit him with all the force she had, but it had only left him slightly staggered. The men, rather the robots, standing behind him seemed to register it as an attack, because they immediately lowered their hips into a battle-ready posture. "It's all right," Leonard told them. "Stand by." The two Alistors straightened again. Kaname backed up to the water tank, hand over her lips, glaring at Leonard. She wanted to cry, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing that. "What was that supposed to be?" she demanded. "A kiss to wake you up, I suppose. I've fallen in love with you, you see." Leonard smiled sincerely at her as he stroked his wounded cheek. "Too bad, because I hate you," she retorted. "You make me want to puke." "That's part of what I like about you," Leonard said idly. "So superficially fragile, yet forceful. Superficially coarse, yet noble. You're like water, ever shifting." "Shut up!" Kaname shouted. He held up his hands in mock fear, then gave an inaudible order to the robots. One walked to the roof's exit and yanked the locked metal door off its hinges. "I think I'd better leave before you try to kill me," he decided.
The other robot, the one that was carrying the mithril man, laid the corpse down on the concrete. No, it wasn't a corpse. The man actually stirred and then let out a wordless groan. Yes, it lives, Leonard said. I'd consider this person an enemy as well. But, I wonder, would you care very much if I eliminated him? Would you care very much if I eliminated them? The robot pointed the black gun barrel glinting on the back of its left arm at the man, and a dull thunk rang out as it prepared to fire. This was the same high-caliber machine gun it had used to finish off the assassin earlier. "Wait!" Kaname cried out. "Why?" Leonard asked curiously. I still have business with that person," Kaname said. "Don't kill him!" But they spoke very rudely to you earlier," Leonard said with a frown. "If words could warrant a death sentence, those would certainly qualify." "That's my decision," Kaname said in a hushed tone. "I'll forgive what you did to me if you just don't kill him." "You surprise me," Leonard said. "For scum like this? I doubt your chastity really comes that cheap." "Don't make me say it again. That's my decision," Kaname spelled out, and Leonard looked genuinely shocked for a moment. "You surprise me again," he chuckled. "Very well, then I'll leave this person right here." The robot withdrew its arm cannon, sparing the unconscious agent, while the other picked up the assassin's corpse, again effortlessly. Then, with the two machines trailing behind, Leonard began walking away from the exit, towards the edge of the roof. One more step would take him plunging onto the ground 4 floors down, but he stopped right on the verge and turned back. "Before I say goodbye, a word. I meant it when I said I'd fallen in love with you," Leonard said wistfully. "I wasn't just teasing. Please believe me." She said nothing. "Chidori Kaname-san, you still live in an illusion," he told her earnestly. "In time you'll be able to see a new world, and then a girl like you might not need to fear the whispers." She blinked in confusion. "What are you—" "We'll meet again," he said, cutting her off. Then Leonard and the robots jumped down together and disappeared from her view. There was a sound of cracking asphalt. Kaname ran up to the edge and looked down at the road where they had fallen, but all she saw was gray mist hanging over the dark road. There was no sign of a human presence. Kaname returned to the man from Mithril, who was lying in a puddle. He returned her gaze blankly. The right half of his round, Anpan man-like face was completely caved in, yet there wasn't a drop of blood to be seen. She could see now that what the shot had blasted away wasn't flesh, but urethane foam. The middle-aged face she had seen was actually a skillfully done mask. Now Kaname saw the real face peeking out from beneath it. She removed the mask. Beneath it was the face of a young man with almond-shaped eyes. No, was it a woman? She couldn't tell. The face was slender and androgynous. They were probably a little over 20 years old, she decided, and looked completely emaciated, the face dreadfully pale. It felt like a face she'd seen a few times around the neighborhood, but the memories were vague and she couldn't be sure. "It was a disguise?" she mused out loud. "A disguise, yes," the agent said, now in their natural voice, which sounded cold. There was no blood flowing from the bullet holes in their pot-bellied stomach or chest, either. The agent must have been wearing a bulletproof vest underneath the bodysuit. Still, there were small streams of blood trickling from their shoulders and thighs. "Can you move?" Kaname asked. "How bad are you hurt?" "I'm not sure. That man earlier injected me with something." "You want help?" "No," the agent said, teeth gritted. "I still have my pride. This failure, this mess I've gotten into, I'd rather die like this." "I see." Kaname turned her back on the mithril spy and then took a deep breath.
So many things had happened over the course of just 10 minutes. She felt like her head was going to burst from the swirl of sensations: surprise, relief, suspicion, humiliation, anger, fear, and, most of all, the kiss that continued to linger on her lips, no matter how she tried to wipe it away. Kaname hated that she'd forgotten to resist, that she'd yielded to him at all, even if just for a moment. He'd taken her first kiss. Well, strictly speaking, she'd had a play kiss with a girl in her class back in kindergarten, but assuming that didn't count, this was her first real kiss. Some might find it stupid to care about first kisses in this day and age, but she'd really been convinced that hers would be with someone she loved. Like, for instance, well, someone she loved, at any rate. It had been very important to her, and that man had gone and... Kaname growled and punched the water tank. There was a dull clang. She insisted to herself that the reason she was crying was because of the pain in her fist and the scrapes all over her body. She moaned and whined softly, struggling to hold it all in. The feelings that she'd kept locked down tight since her performance in the teacher's office that had broken their chains and sent her heart pitching and dipping. Her strength, which hadn't wavered even under an assassin's attack, had been shattered into pieces by a single kiss. "Sousuke," she cried. Had she really been so unfazed by his disappearance? Had she really remained cold as ice? Of course she hadn't. "Why aren't you here?" she wondered despairingly. "This is all your fault. None of this would have happened if you were still here. How are you ever going to make it up to me? You can't be happy about this, right? Because I'm definitely not. Do something. Be here. Say, not an issue." She repeated the words under her breath, but, naturally, no reply came. Crying to herself on a random rooftop wasn't going to change anything. If only she could hit a reset button. If only she could turn back time to go back to that haircut. I'm not stupid. I know what I felt as I watched him doze off. Those affectionate feelings and natural urges. This is my punishment for lying to myself about them, she thought miserably. I guess that was my last chance, huh? I could have spoken to him sweetly. I could have said, "Hey, want a kiss?" But I ran away instead. I doused him with water and ran away. And while it was just a small fantasy, it was important to me, and now I've missed the chance forever, after he's already gone. I'm always this way, she sniffled. Even if I find someone I like, I refuse to acknowledge it. They always betray you anyway, I say. You can't depend on anyone. They'll end up hurting you just like Mom. So I don't rely on anyone. I don't get close to anyone. I don't even admit to how I feel most of the time. Then it's only when it's too late that I realize what I could have done but didn't have the courage to do. Sousuke, she choked out again. Is it the same again this time? Will I let things end without taking any action? Again, she asked herself, is this really the end? How long had she spent now, crying and trembling in the rain? Her tears stopped, and she looked up. She turned, walked back up to the mithril agent lying on the ground, and said, You said you'd rather die, right? The agent said nothing. Why not put in a little more unsightly struggling, she suggested. That's what I'm gonna do. On and on, forever. Chapter 5. His Problem. 22 October, 11:38 hours, East China Standard Time. Mid-levels, Hong Kong Special Ward. People's Committee side, Hong Kong. 10 minutes had passed since they'd been ushered into the vast, high-ceilinged meeting room. The space, positioned on the 30th floor of a high-rise apartment complex, belonged to the Mithril intelligence agent stationed here in Hong Kong, though the agent himself hadn't arrived yet. Large windows overlooked the ocean far below, bathing the room in natural light. Actually, with that, I'll switch to the, I can't remember if I've got any other pictures here for this week. I'll switch to the color Leonard photo. I say photo, yeah, okay. There'll be a bunch next week that I'll have to sort through, but we'll just do this for now. Sorry, I'm doing this, like, because I'm dim and I don't think fast. I should have thought of this earlier. I think it's Front Matter 3? Yes, it's Front Matter 3. He's just fabulous. Look at this boy. He's just so fabulous. Where were we? Yes. Large windows overlooked the ocean far below, bathing the room in natural light. The steep slope of Mount Victoria was home to countless buildings, but even among those, this one was especially tall. It offered a clear view of the city far beyond, a clustering of structures, new and old, large and small. Sousuke had heard it described before, but seeing the density of the high-rises in person, it almost seemed unreal. Confusion, disorder, chaos, that was the only way to describe the sight. Weird. It still doesn't look all that different now, Mao said from behind him. You've been here before? Sousuke questioned. A few times before the handover, Mao told him. Mom had family in the neighborhood then. They've moved to New York since, but I crashed with them for about 2 months before I came to Mithril, just lazing around. Lazing around? He asked. It was after I got myself drummed out of the Marines. I couldn't muster up the will to get a job, and I didn't want to go home to New York. I knew my dad would be an ass to me, she said, clicking her tongue. Air Force bastard. Mao hadn't spoken much to Sousuke about her past before, so he was a little surprised to hear her bring it up so freely now. Your father was in the military? He asked, curious to know more. Sure, she said dismissively. A bomber pilot and a total half-wit, too. He's retired now and works at a firm. Acts like he's hot shit, but he's always been a stingy little miser, always hatching some scheme or other. Scheme? Sousuke echoed curiously. Yeah. See, I was trying to get an honest job out of high school, but instead of letting me do that, he pulled a bunch of strings to marry me off to this spoiled rich Harvard jerk. It pissed me the hell off, so to spite him, I bailed on my wedding day to join the Marines. Mao must have had fond memories of the occasion, because she turned her eyes down and grinned. I snuck out of the church and hit up a recruiting station 4 blocks away, still in my wedding dress. She continued to reminisce. You should have seen the recruiter's face. He's all, Are you serious? And I'm all, Hell yes. Everyone at the station came to talk me out of it. Ma'am, please reconsider. Think of how your parents will feel, they say. That's when I mention that my dad's Air Force, and I swear the reply comes in perfect unison. That changes everything. Sign right here. Yang, listening from a few seats away, was unable to restrain his laughter. What do you think of a woman like that? Mao wanted to know. It's awesome, Yang snickered. Seriously, that's just great. His shoulders were shaking as tears formed in his eyes, and he shot her a thumbs up. Silly stories to pass the time combined with pre-mission jitters, the room's silence combined with Yang's stifled laughter. It was a strange atmosphere. The light streaming in from the windows cast Mao and Yang in clear silhouette, and though it seemed like a light-hearted scene at a glance, it was saturated by a strange melancholy. Mao gazed off into the sky, her eyes nostalgic. Awesome, huh? Yeah, I guess it was pretty awesome. The moment I made the decision, I felt like my world became limitless, like I could do anything, like I could go anywhere. Anywhere? Sousuke asked, as if hearing the word for the first time. She shrugged in response. Yeah, I mean, life went on after that, and I had my share of setbacks and disappointments. But I'm still really glad I did what I did then. It made me love myself more. You know what I mean? Sousuke couldn't quite wrap his mind around what Mao was talking about. He couldn't understand why she'd brought it up all of a sudden either. It's just being back in the city that reminded me, she said. Don't read into it or anything. Sousuke answered, mildly befuddled. It was then that the reception room door opened, granting entrance to a plump, middle-aged Caucasian man. Hello, he said. Sorry for the wait. Dabbing sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief, he approached them. He had a big, friendly face, framed by pomade-slicked black hair and a goatee. Sousuke judged him to be around 50, though he could easily have been younger. This man is... Sousuke and Mao exchanged a glance of disbelief. Mithril intelligence agent Gavin Hunter. The name had inspired images of stoic and square-jawed, but instead they got rotund and sweaty. Something about it felt slightly anticlimactic. Hunter's public face was that of a well-to-do trader. He spoke Cantonese and Mandarin ably, and was friendly with both armies, enough that he could dine with their top brass most nights. He was as far as one could get from the popular image of a spy, but then, gathering information didn't require grand James Bond-style adventuring. Offhand statements from military officials, minor items in a newspaper's finance columns, the sight of unfamiliar ships in port. Inferences could be drawn from all kinds of places, and that was the intelligence division's bread and butter. I probably don't have to tell you that both North and South are a little on edge right now, Hunter explained. Even at a glance, it should be obvious how serious the situation has become. Between both armies, we've had 3 incidents of friendly fire and 4 incidents of firing on civilians. It's basically a miracle that they aren't in a shooting war just yet. But that's probably just a matter of time. And if one starts? Mao questioned. Then fire flies across Victoria Bay. Anything larger than a pistol is in range, after all. Rifles, machine guns, bombs, rockets, ATMs. It'll be a horror show, Hunter told them. An instant inferno. You've seen the way the city's laid out. The North and South Chinese armies had been in a standoff across Victoria Bay since the split. The only thing keeping guns in holsters was the fact that neither wanted to see Hong Kong set ablaze. The recent AS terrorism, though, had begun to chip away at that resolve. What about the citizens? She asked next. We started their evacuations a little while back. The South Chinese go to the new territories inland. The North Chinese go to Lantau, and the northern part of Hong Kong Island. That's mainly women and children, of course. I sent my own family to my villa in Lantau, Hunter said. They've mutually locked down almost all travel between the North and South. No entries are allowed in the port, and almost all flights into both Kai Tak and Cheklap Kok airports have been cancelled. The stocks and foreign exchanges are a mess. He sighed despairingly. Heaven's sake, they'd only just pulled off the separation, too. It's really going to turn into Berlin at this rate. But they did pull it off, Mao whispered in vague astonishment. At this, Hunter raised a cocky eyebrow. That's what it means to be Chinese. Clever and enthusiastic, with a spirit exhausting in its industriousness. Total mastery of internal thought and outward expression. Yin and yang in perfect balance. Huh? Eat Chinese food sometime, and you'll begin to grasp the breadth of their culture and civilization, he boasted. The ideology Westerners have cultivated over a mere 100 years doesn't compare. Brokers like me knew that the separation would represent both a crisis and an opportunity. That some would go bankrupt and some would get rich. Just business as usual. And I'll tell you, even with the split government and the occupying armies, the coming and going between North and South stayed relatively simple up until now. We could work anything out, as long as backs needed scratching. He said it all with pride, as if he himself were a purebred Hong Konger, even though he was the only white person in the room. So, what do you know about the AS? Mao asked in an attempt to move things along. We haven't been able to discern its whereabouts, Hunter answered. It last appeared 3 hours ago in Shouke-1 on the Hong Kong island side. It took out 2 ASs and an armored car. 4 North Chinese Army soldiers dead, 8 civilians badly wounded. Just awful. You're sure it's hiding in the city? She pressed. We can't say for certain, although it's what our Hong Kong branch analysts and their AI think, Hunter confirmed. It's also what my gut tells me, but the layout of the city presents a challenge. Then he spread out a map and launched into a technical explanation. His opinions were those of a seasoned professional who'd already done a lot of investigation, and his deep love for Hong Kong showed through in every word. Mao knew everything about how invisibility ECSs worked, and combined with Sosuke's occasional suggestion, she managed to tighten Hunter's analysis even more. It was a truly productive session. Both Mao's team and Hunter's were ground-level operators, which meant the executive-level friction between intelligence and operations was irrelevant to them. Any more areas or situations we can rule out? Hunter asked while typing into his AI terminal. Any place that sees a lot of activity from pigeons and crows and such, Mao replied. Oh? Hunter asked, sounding curious. Why birds? It turns out birds can see invisible ASs, probably because the ECS can't block ultraviolet light, and crows in particular will circle around them, squawking and making trouble. The same goes for dogs, who are sensitive to the ozone smell released by an ECS. Aha, of course, Hunter said thoughtfully. Anything else? Mao glanced at Sosuke. I think that's about it. Sosuke? Sosuke said, as if snapping out of some reverie. Anything else? No, he told them. I can't think of anything. Mao could tell that Sosuke was distracted. He'd been that way since they'd left the Tuach de Danann. Hunter, staring hard at the monitor, let out a hum of appreciation. Very impressive. 49 locations on the Hong Kong side, 78 on the Kowloon side. We should be able to cover this in half a day if my men and yours split the work. Hopefully, Mao agreed. If we do find them, let's try to finish them off in one go. They'd decided to send their people on an investigation of every possible location that could house the enemy AS. There was no time to spare, so Mao's men would also split into 3 teams for the search. Sosuke and Mao would cross Victoria Bay and head to the Kowloon Peninsula. Yang and Wu would search the Hong Kong island. The 3rd team would be the transport helicopter that had brought them there in the first place. While staying invisible with its own ECS, it would scan all of Hong Kong from overhead with an ECCS. The device in question, an ECS detector, wasn't very effective in urban areas, so they would mainly cover the suburbs and other outlying islands. The vans they'd borrowed from Hunter had the large Chinese characters, unpronounceable to me because I can't read them, written on the side. It just meant Hunter Cleaning Company, with the word Hunter represented by its literal meaning rather than by phonetics. Sosuke, who had little experience with the Chinese language, found the writing strange and foreign despite its similarity to Japanese. That old man seemed to have his fingers in a lot of pies, Mao observed with folded arms in the building's underground parking lot. The 4 of them had already changed into cleaning company uniforms, with Sosuke's being the most ill-fitting. Everyone have your licenses? Double-check your work permits and passes as well, Mao ordered, and make sure to keep your fake passport and credit card in separate pockets. Sidearms are limited to 1 apiece. Discharging your weapon is strictly forbidden. Report in regularly, and remember that we're under martial law, so be careful. What if the army or police tries to take us into custody? Yang asked. There are some divisions Hunter doesn't have friends in, right? That's right, so be careful, Mao emphasized. If you can do it, running is your best option. Whatever you do, don't fire your weapon. We can't afford to have you hitting innocent army personnel. But other than that, do what you have to. If you're caught, it'll be some time until Hunter can interfere, and you'll probably be subject to severe interrogation in the meantime. If you are tortured, don't talk. That's all. That's harsh, Yang muttered. The greater concern is being sighted by the enemy, Mao said pointedly. If you're killed because you failed to stay in contact or get permission before acting, it's not my concern. Got it? Roger. Okay, let's go, she said. They split up into the two cleaning company vans, pulled out of the parking lot, then parted ways into the city. Yang and Wu's van was headed for Victoria Peak, while the van Sosuke was driving spent a few minutes heading down a sharp, tree-lined slope until it came out into Chungwan, the district better known as Central. Devu Road was like a concrete ravine flanked by mountains of towering skyscrapers. Sosuke, who had grown up in the country, found the sight slightly overwhelming. Only one thin slice of the cloudy sky was visible. Chungwan was a commercial district on par with Tokyo's Shinjuku or Marunouchi areas, but the area seemed almost abandoned at present. No people and no car traffic. Double-decker trams rattled down the roads, but their drivers seemed to be the only ones aboard. The clang of metal against their rails echoed emptily in the air around them. So weird. I've never seen Central like this before, Mao observed from the passenger seat, as she cast her gaze across the deserted city. They made it to a large five-way intersection where they could see North Chinese Army armored trucks and ASs on full alert. These were olive-colored RK-92 Savages, the same popular export model used by North Korea. Sosuke and Mao proceeded east along the road, departing Wan Chai on their way to Causeway Bay. The valley between buildings seemed to go on and on, with the famous neon Hong Kong signage growing more and more prevalent here. Shop names jutted out from their buildings in gaudy green and red, threatening to smother the sky above. What follows are 2 lines worth of sign names in Chinese that I can't begin to read, so we're going to ignore them. Sosuke caught characters he thought he recognized as a beauty shop, an interior decorator, a stereo company, a pharmacy, and a bar, but he didn't read kanji all that well to start with, and had no idea how to read most of it in Japanese. Along with the neon, much of the signage was LED, and he even saw a few cutting-edge hologram signs, early efforts at integrating ECS technology in consumer spaces. At last, they reached the undersea tunnel that would take them to Kowloon Peninsula, the side under control of the South Chinese Army. The entrance to the tunnel was under strict guard, 4 savages, 2 armored cars, and over 60 heavily armed infantrymen. They'd piled up embankments here and there, which they'd topped with barbed wire and machine gun emplacements. Just inside the tunnel was a checkpoint gate, where a short line of civilian vehicles sat, their drivers attempting to petition for passage. None of them were allowed to proceed, and in the end, each one was forced to turn and go back. In theory, Hunter had arranged Sosuke's and Mao's passage with the head of security here, but this sight had him worried. You really think they'll let us through? Sosuke wondered. If Hunter's connections are good, Mao answered, they should. A soldier with an AKM rifle spread in his arms in front of the gate. A soldier with an AKM rifle spread his arms in front of the gate and said, "Stop," in Cantonese. He came around to the driver's side and started talking at Sosuke through the window. All Sosuke had managed to memorize in the helicopter was some day-to-day conversation, so he couldn't understand the man at all. "Mao, would you?" he asked. "Ming bak lok," she told the soldier. "Hoi keng." Sosuke tilted his head. "It means, got it, open the window," Mao translated. Sosuke silently did as he was told, and opened the van's power window. Then he just watched while Mao launched into fluent Cantonese. She showed them their work credentials and passage permit, then seemed to explain the situation. Then the soldier said to Sosuke, "Hoji." Sosuke just looked on helplessly.
Mao tapped Sosuke on the shoulder, then pointed ahead of him. "Neitai," she said. "Ngo de hoji zolak." I can't pronounce Cantonese at all, so I apologize. I'd spell it out, but I'm just going to move on. The gate in front of them opened with a rattle. Interpreting her words to mean go, Sosuke eased the van forward. They'd successfully cleared the first gate, and now they raced down the tunnel beneath Victoria Bay. There were no cars around. It was just their van on the empty 3-lane road. "I really can't believe it," Mao said with awe. "This tunnel is usually packed." "You're surprised by a lot lately," Sosuke observed neutrally. "Of course I am," she retorted. "Anyone who'd seen Hong Kong before this would be shocked." "Really?" he asked skeptically. "Well, try to imagine it. How would you feel if you saw Tokyo looking like this?" Mao's comment caught Sosuke unawares, and he felt an internal flinch. What if Shinjuku and Ginza were divided, armies in standoff, one wrong move away from a shooting war?" she went on. "No more hip young people shopping and eating ice cream downtown. Instead, it's swarming with armored cars and ASs. The Bayside area, perfect for quiet walks, is mounted with pillboxes and bunkers. It's like, I can't believe this is the Hong Kong I know. That's how weird it is. It's like a world turned upside down." Sosuke said nothing. For the first time ever, he felt like he really grasped the nature of peace and how it applied to the city he'd lived in for the past 6 months. No tanks, no ASs, no police or soldiers hungry for bribes, streets bustling with cars and people, overflowing with cheerful music and laughter. Tokyo at peace. School at peace. Classroom at peace. And... "Sosuke?" Mao said, interrupting his thoughts. Is something wrong?" "No, it's nothing." Sosuke brushed away the face that had appeared in the back of his mind. "Stay alert," Mao instructed. "We're coming up on the south side's checkpoint." "Right," he said. "I know." They weren't out of the tunnel yet, but they could already see a chain-link fence blocking the way forward. This was the entrance to the Kowloon Peninsula, which was controlled by the South Chinese Army. Hunter must have also called in a favor with the commander here, because after a brief exchange, they were let right through. "I can't believe it was that easy," Sosuke said. "Definitely surprising," Mao agreed. The two were feeling a bit out of sorts out of how easily they'd passed through both checkpoints. Security was so strict, after all, they'd been prepared to deal with a much chillier reception. "Hunter must be a really powerful man. He must really be a powerful man here," Sosuke observed. "Definitely, if he can get both armies to accede to him that easily," Mao said. "Of course, I'm sure his dealings aren't totally above board." "True." The most likely situation was that he sold black market goods to both armies. That would earn Hunter the gratitude of the army bigwigs, who hungered for money and status, while also giving him blackmail material on them. For an intelligence agent, that was 2 birds with 1 stone. Sosuke had known men like him in countless conflict regions. "I think we're almost there," he said. Their vehicle entered a street lined with modern-looking hotels, which was home to one of the locations on their list. A trading center under construction, perfect for hiding an AS. The construction had been commissioned by a Malaysian business not well known in Hong Kong, and the documentation behind it had its share of question marks. "What happens if we hit pay dirt on our first try?" Mao wondered idly. "Nothing special," said Sosuke humorlessly. "We should be ready for that at all times." They were currently passing a large park, which was surrounded on 3 sides by hotels and shopping centers. A South Chinese Army AS was standing watch over the park's entrance. It was an early model M6 Bushnell, designed for export and lacking an ECS of its own. Next to it was an English-made generator truck, which was probably there to keep it powered on the cheap during the extended standby. A generator truck, Sosuke thought. He knew why it looked so familiar. It was the same model as the one he'd stolen in Sunan, right after he'd saved her.
She'd been yelling so much at him she'd been yelling at him so much then that he couldn't get a word in edgewise. Even with enemies raining fire on them, she wouldn't believe a word he said. Sagara-kun, calm down, she'd admonished him. You're confused and hallucinating. Sagara-kun. That's right, he remembered. That's what she still called me back then. When was it that I became Sosuke to her? I think it was... Sosuke! Mao screamed. He gasped. I just drove through a red light into an intersection. Horns blared, and a taxi closed on their left side. Brakes squealed, and the van pitched forward, causing the bumper to scrape against the asphalt. There was a shriek, which was followed by sparks and an impact, as the taxi scraped off their bumper. The van flew to the right, then skidded sideways, fragments flying. They came to a rest in the middle of the intersection. The taxi driver stopped, jumped out into the road, and started screaming at them. 4 soldiers ran towards them from the park they'd just passed. The M6 remained where it was, but its head was turned towards them. My lips are dying. Give me a sec. The M6 remained where it was, but its head was turned towards them. Mao just looked at Sosuke from the passenger's seat, her face pale. She seemed too overwhelmed even to scream at him. Just leave this to me, okay? Not one word. It's fine, just stay here, she snapped, rushing out of the car. Mao turned to face the approaching soldiers and called in a distressed voice, Marfan Siley! It was probably something like, I'm sorry, we weren't paying attention, but the soldiers, seemingly far from mollified, just pointed their rifles at her and shouted. They were probably telling her to shut up. Days on high alert had left the soldiers' nerves frayed to the breaking point, and they moved like men ready to kill. One of them grabbed Mao by the shoulders and forced her to the ground, then dragged Sosuke out of the driver's side door. He noticed the taxi driver was being accosted in the same way. The man let out a pitiful cry and clung to the soldier, then pointed accusingly at Mao and Sosuke. Mao, caught in a joint lock, was struggling to explain herself. She was employing a piteous tone to try to invite sympathy, but it didn't seem like it was working. It was the worst possible scenario. A lapse of judgment in combat was one thing, but a simple traffic accident caused by inattentiveness? It was an unbelievably foolish mistake, and even Sosuke was shocked that he'd let it happen. If they were taken into custody now, it would jeopardize the entire mission. He was racking his brain to figure out what to do, when in that moment it happened. The M6, just 30 meters away, dropped to its knees with a crash. Sosuke looked up in shock. The machine's long, narrow head had been twisted off and was now floating in midair, sparking and trailing cables and pipes like a rokurokubi. Its squat form let out a metallic cry of pain as it struggled, flapped its limbs, and grasped an unseen something. Then, with a sudden roar, the massive M6 went flying. It skidded down the road and crashed into a hotel facing the park, where it sent up a cloud of concrete and shattered glass. Within the billowing dust and smoke, then, Sosuke could see arcs of crackling electricity. After images of blue light revealed the telltale silhouette of an AS with invisibility mode engaged. The soldiers gulped, their eyes immediately drawn to the sinister machine. It had an upper half like an inverted triangle, and a diamond-shaped head, and it was painted with a gray and dark blue camouflage pattern. All that, plus the unmistakable red mono-eye, it was the Venom. The Venom dropped the M6's head, now just a severed cluster of sensors and machine guns, unceremoniously to the ground. It fell onto a Benz parked nearby, crushing the roof and windshield.
Then the Venom pulled an assault rifle from its back, aimed it at the still struggling M6's body, and began unloading on full automatic at close range. The M6's arms and legs were helplessly blown off, and then it exploded. The deafening shockwave of heat and force even managed to reach the intersection where Sousuke and Mao were being held. Mao flew at the driver and tackled him to the ground. It was then that Sousuke realized he was standing stock still, and he opened his eyes wide in shock. The commotion brought another M6 stationed nearby running. It immediately took cover by kneeling behind a hotel on the Venom's other side, and pointed its rifle around the corner in its direction. Mao got up, and this time it was Sousuke that she tackled as the M6 opened fire. The Venom raised its left arm, and the shots flew off in all directions without even making contact. That invisible wall again, Sousuke thought. The ricochets peppered the nearby buildings and signs, spreading the destruction. "Gao-meng-ah!" came the cries around him. He couldn't even move. In the roaring exchange of gunfire, Sousuke could hear soldiers screaming. Fragments rained down everywhere. Offhandedly, the Venom shot the new M6's rifle out of its hand, then tore down the road in Sousuke's general direction. Someone let out a cry of despair as the gray machine dashed across the ground, coming closer and closer. Then, with an explosive bound and a pulverizing of asphalt, it was gone. With silent effort, Sousuke waved away the dust around him and looked up. The Venom had landed on the roof of a nearby building 20 floors high. It must have gone all that way in the blink of an eye with the aid of a wire gun. If so, then it had the jumping power to rival that of an M9. The machine's red mono-eye paid Sousuke and Mao no attention. Its gaze was more distant, perhaps checking the reaction of the South Chinese army. After surveying the surrounding area, the Venom whipped around and activated its ECS, disappearing past the rooftop as it faded from sight. That was the end of the battle. Smoke rose from the intersection. One soldier, arm injured from a flying piece of shrapnel, was wailing loudly. Another was checking the wound and speaking rapidly about nothing in particular. The most veteran-looking of the four was yelling something into a walkie-talkie, while the remaining soldier just stood in the middle of the intersection, staring blankly. And who can blame him, really? The South Chinese army soldiers seemed to have lost interest in Mao. She called out to one, and he gave a quick response before running in a panic towards the burning M6. She then said something to the taxi driver and jerked her thumb back at the van with Hunter's company name written on it. The driver looked a bit disgruntled about it, but Mao said something else, and at last he returned to his vehicle with an air of acceptance. Mao approached Sousuke and whispered into his ear, "Let's go." "Will they let us?" he whispered back. "The guy said if you hadn't gotten into that accident, we probably would have been crushed when it grabbed the M6, so we'll overlook it." Mao climbed swiftly into the now bumperless van, and into the driver's seat, naturally. Sousuke was in no position to argue and slid obediently into the passenger's seat. The collision at the intersection and the appearance of the Venom, the quick succession of completely unanticipated incidents, had left Sousuke in a mild state of shock. It had shaken him as badly as his separation from Kaname, or his loss to Clouseau. "What in the world is wrong with me?" he wondered. "If the Venom hadn't shown up just then, we would have been taken into the army's custody, and things would have only gotten worse from there. What's going on? It's like everything's coming out of nowhere. Why does reality feel so out of my control?" A feeling of powerlessness spread through Sousuke's limbs and gnawed away at his heart, numbing him all over. It was like nothing made sense anymore. Mao spoke as she started up the engine again. "You shot through a red light. You could have killed us." "Sorry. Were you thinking about her?" Mao asked. When Sousuke failed to respond, Mao suddenly grabbed his collar and pulled him in. "You need to forget about her for now.
she demanded. "If you can't, you need to get out of this van. I understand how you feel, but even a nice big sister like me has her limits, okay? I'm not going to get killed because of you. If you can't get it together, I'll be safer alone." Mao's words were only natural. She wouldn't be able to lay into him like this if she didn't respect him as an equal. A show of sympathy here and now would be wrong, both as a friend and as a colleague. But as reasonable as her words were, in his current frame of mind, Sosuke just couldn't deal with them. At length he said, "You're right," then grabbed the bag containing his radio and equipment and opened the door. "Sosuke?" she asked incredulously. "I'm sorry," he apologized. "I just can't do this anymore." "Hey!" "Continue the mission," he told Mao, cutting her off. Then he got out of the car and began to walk alone down the street, which was littered with building material and brick. Of course, he didn't know where he was going. Mao was shouting something at him from behind, but he wasn't even listening. He didn't care. He didn't care about anything. Not about his mithril mission, not about the venom, not about the arbalest or Al, nor about the fate of his city. Sorry about that. 22 October, 15:53 hours, Chinese East Standard Time. Shungwan, Special Ward, Hong Kong Island. In the 3 hours since they'd parted ways with Mao and Sosuke, Corporal Yang and Private Wu had checked out 11 possible hideout locations, but not one had borne fruit. At this particular moment, Yang was sluggishly steering their van around a high-rise apartment district in a corner of Shungwan. Built on the slope of Mount Victoria, it was an area full of steep hills and sharp curves. "I wish I could just gun it," Yang grumbled. Roads like these got his blood racing. They reminded him of his days living outside of Daegu, where he'd spent his evenings slingshotting around the mountain passes. It got him to thinking, "How'd I end up playing mercenary in a place like this?" To which his mind responded, "Because I was broke." As the third son of the owner of a tiny auto repair shop, Yang was in no financial position to consider a racing career. And in some ironic twist of fate, he turned out to have more talent as a soldier than a driver. He was grudgingly conscripted into the army, and while grudgingly undergoing training, he'd caught the eye of an officer at the base, who then strong-armed him into their airborne forces. Then, in some kind of a mistake, he'd been deployed into a conflict still treated as top secret even in his home country, and he'd been wandering aimlessly ever since. That's how he'd ended up here, in this place, driving a van at a snail's pace. "No gunning it, Corporal," Wu assured him from the passenger seat. "We need to be careful. One slip-up and we won't have to wait for the enemy to kill us. The Master Sergeant will do it for them." "I know that," Yang grumped. "Okay, we're here. This is the place." He parked. Lips are dying again. Give me a sec to get some more water in me. I apologize. "I know that," Yang grumped. "Okay, we're here. This is the place." He parked the van in front of a high-rise apartment. It's happening again. He parked the van in front of a high-rise apartment building, which was under construction. It had been financed by a foreign firm whose credentials weren't widely known, and came with an underground parking lot just large enough to fit an AS. Uru's 9 to all teams, Wu radioed in. We're about to investigate Point 28. If there's no contact in 15 minutes, move in. Uru's 2, roger that. Mao's voice came across coldly on the radio. For some reason, there was no response from Sousuke. He'd heard the venom had appeared in the Kowloon Peninsula. Had they run into some trouble? HQ, roger. Take care. This was Hunter's voice. Here we go, said Yang. Keep your guard up, Wu. Yeah. They both got out of the van and began to approach the building. According to Hunter's information, construction on the apartment had stopped 3 days ago. The reason given was a labor dispute, but there were no details other than that. Passing through the bamboo scaffolds and netting, Yang and Wu proceeded into the dark interior, where they pulled out their automatic pistols. They moved down the steps cautiously, being careful not to make a sound. Even their sidearms had silencers attached. They couldn't sense anyone's presence. There was no door yet on the entrance to the garage, so Yang listened carefully at the empty frame, then signaled to Wu with his eyes and his hand. They stepped silently into the underground garage. It was a vast concrete space. No cars, just mounds of construction equipment. It's a dud, Wu reported. This makes 8. Hush! Yang had just noticed a leg peeking out from behind a cement bag, one of many piled up haphazardly in a corner of the garage. There was a person on the ground there. Wu noticed it too and went silent. The two men approached, keeping alert in all directions. What they found turned out to be a man's dead body. He was in his 40s, dressed in a dingy jumpsuit, and he'd been shot through the head. Ugh, a worker here, do you think? Wu asked, turning away from the corpse. Yeah, maybe he left something on the site. Came back, saw something, and got shot. Poor guy. Looks like he's been dead about 2 days, Yang said, calmly searching around the corpse. He opened the mouth with his bare hand and poked around. One sec. Sorry about that. More Ikitude is coming. Here we go. Yeah, maybe he left something on the site, came back, saw something, and got shot. Poor guy. Looks like he's been dead about 2 days, Yang said, calmly searching around the corpse. He opened the mouth with his bare hand and poked around the maggot-swarmed cavity. There didn't seem to be an explosive planted in it. You can pinpoint the time, even? Wu said, in tones of great admiration. That's impressive. Rigor mortis is past and decomp has started, Yang explained briefly. Other factors are the dryness of the mucous membranes in the eyes and the color of post-mortem lividity. We won't know the exact time of death without an autopsy, though. Aha. So you think this is their base? Wu reasoned. I don't know, but if they were using this as a hideout, they'll have abandoned it by now, Yang told him. Our greater concern should be any gifts they've left behind. Gifts? Traps, Yang clarified for his partner. Bombs to act as alarms. Wu looked around, feeling suddenly unnerved. We'll be okay, but don't touch anything other than what I touch, Yang ordered. Understand? Roger that, Wu said. But, boy, Corporal, you really are SRT. Yang looked at him questioningly. Nothing. But hey, look at his chest. Yeah. Yang had noticed it too. There was an unnatural-looking stain of some kind on the t-shirt visible beneath the man's coveralls. At first he'd thought it was agglutinated blood that had become discolored, but that didn't appear to be the case. While on the alert for traps, Yang carefully lowered the zipper. It wasn't a stain. Someone had written something there with a black magic marker. The words were in English and read, "To the cub of the tiger of Badakhshan, meet with the Hamdullah of Tsim Sha Tsui." "You understand what that means?" Wu asked. "Nope, not a clue." Yang shrugged and turned on his radio. October 22, 1614 hours, East China Standard Time. Tuach de Danan, South China Sea. The surface above them was a mess. Because nothing was being allowed into port, there were tons of cargo ships waiting on Hong Kong's doorstep, all stuck in a deadlock. The unprecedented traffic had left the sonar shack and target movement analysis system busier than they'd ever been. Tessa knew that even rising to periscope depth could cause a collision, so she kept her vessel moving low and slow, like a whale dancing along the seafloor, one eye always on the surrounding terrain as mapped out by their high-frequency sonar. The slow progress was fraying the crew's nerves, but with the South Chinese Army on patrol, it was better than being discovered. "Captain, intelligence message from the Intelligence Division," said the boat's AI, Dana. The antenna of the surfaced turtle had picked up the communique. The turtles are they're like wire-guided, periscopy things. Tessa yielded control to Mardukas, called Major Kalinin to the bridge via the internal phone line, then scanned quickly through the information provided. Things had taken a turn for the worse. The North Chinese Army was starting to believe that the South was masterminding the Venom's reign of destruction, dismissing the damage inflicted in the South's territory as some kind of false flag. Chief Yang Xiaokun, with the Peking government, the People's Liberation Committee, said, "If the actors of the Cantonese puppet state continue with these provocations, we will be forced to protect the interests of the Chinese people." Mithril's spy satellite tracking... Mithril's spy satellite tracking of the movements of the North Chinese Army suggested that it wasn't a bluff. Secretary General Zhong Gaolao of the Canton government, the Chinese Democratic Union, had also appeared before Western media to criticize the North's statement. "Peking is attempting to exploit this disaster to seize control of the Three Gorges Dam. We, as representatives of the people, will not yield to threats from the North," he'd said. South Chinese squadrons had gone on high alert all over the country. The North had offered a time limit, 2,200 hours today. If, by then, things in Hong Kong weren't resolved, or if the South didn't make some show of good faith, they could not be held responsible for their actions. In other words, the Civil War was about to reignite. Countless people would die, swallowed up by the flames of conflict. Tessa looked at her watch. It was 16:31 hours, just 5.5 hours to go. "This is a disaster," she muttered. "It's too soon." Yes, it was too soon. Even 8 hours would be enough for them to find and finish the Venom, surely. That was what Mao and the Intelligence Division had assumed they would have when they had... That was what Mao and the Intelligence Division had assumed they would have when they'd formulated their reconnaissance plan. What were Mithril's top brass thinking? Why weren't they using every connection they had to convince both armies to stand down? There was nothing her squad alone could do. Did they really intend to leave everything up to a 16-year-old commander and her team of 200? "Put me through to Operations HQ, she commanded. "Channel G3. "There is a slight chance of Channel G3 being intercepted," Dana warned. "I don't care," Tessa replied tersely. "Hurry." "Aye, ma'am. There is also an incoming message on Channel G1. It's from Uruz, too." This time, it was a direct message from Hong Kong. She'd never felt so busy before. "Put it through." "Yes, ma'am." It was a report from Mao in Hong Kong. Apparently, Corporal Yang had discovered a corpse with a strange message attached. The Intelligence Division's recon teams had found the same message in 2 other locations as well. Why is there a comma there? There shouldn't be a comma there. It was a report from Mao in Hong Kong. Apparently, Corporal Yang had discovered a corpse with a strange message attached. The Intelligence Division's recon teams had found the same message in 2 other locations as well. These ones didn't come with corpses, but were just scrawled on the wall or the floor. Additionally, they'd found the same words printed in 3 local newspapers in classified ads. The cub of the tiger of Badakhshan? Tessa scowled as she heard the message. What could it mean? It doesn't sound like a distraction tactic, Mardukas said. Tessa had heard that name, Badakhshan. It had been about 4 months ago, but there were 2 people in her orbit with deep connections to that place. The ship's AI, Dana, analyzed the message, but all of their known decryption systems turned up dry. Badakhshan was a place in the northeast of Afghanistan. Tsimshatsui was a city center in Kowloon. Hamdullah was an extremely common Arabic name. They'd searched for Hamdullahs in Hong Kong and found about 4 matches. She'd given orders for the Intelligence Division to investigate each of them. Just then, Kalainen came in from the hangar. "Reporting in," he said shortly. "Perfect timing, Major. Look at this." Tessa put the message on the screen, and his scowl grew a notch deeper. "Kalainen-san," she said, "does it register with you?" "Some of it," he acknowledged after a pause. "The Tiger of Badakhshan was a sobriquet of a certain legendary commander of Afghani guerrillas." "Afghani guerrillas?" Tessa questioned. "Yes," Kalainen confirmed. "I went at it with him several times myself. At the time, the USSR sent multiple assassins to eliminate him. One was even an 8-year-old child. But all their attempts failed. He was a compassionate man, and he kept the young assassin and gave him a new name. The name was..." Kalainen fell silent for a moment, and then said, "Kashim." Tessa held silent for a moment. Kashim. She had first heard that name from the Arbalest's mission recorder during the seajacking 2 months ago. "Colonel," Kalainen continued, "could you put me through to Sergeant Sagara?" "Of course," Tessa replied. "TDD HQ to Urus 2. Please put Urus 7 on." "Urus 7 here. Urus 7 here. Mao hesitated through the static. "What is it?" Tessa asked. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Mao apologized. "Urus 7 isn't with me." And on that melodramatic note, we will call it for today. We'll continue and finish up Book 5 next week. That should be pretty doable. Yes. So things are getting dramatic. Somebody wants someone
There we go. Sorry about that. I don't know how long the mic has been out. Hopefully, not since I stopped the dialogue, the reading. We'll find out. Anyway, that will do it for today. I was just covering what we'll be doing the rest of the week. Yeah. 40,000 in Gehenna on Wednesday and Ascension Factor on Friday. That's the general game plan, and then more of this, the last portion of Book 5 of Full Metal Panic next Monday. And yeah, that I think does it. I can't think of anything else salient. If you have any book suggestions or feedback, feel free to leave it. You can do it in the Discord. You can do it as a comment on the video. Do whatever. Yeah. Nothing crazy. Nothing too crazy today. Anyway,